What's up, everyone? Welcome back. Another episode of Atikan Alpha, where we are trying to build wealth as a team, including ourselves. So what we're saying here is it's a circle, not a triangle. And Colin, welcome to the show, my friend.
Heck yeah, brother. Let's jump into it.
Yeah, I think we both hit on a topic recently. Well, number one, I think it'd be cool actually to start saying where we are. So we're in the wealth management space for anybody listening, and it'd be cool to kind of tagline where we are. So our personal goal is building up the wealth management firm to manage $1 billion in assets. Currently, I checked yesterday, we're at 322 million. And while I think we've gone a pretty good distance as a boutique wealth management firm, I think we should be proud of ourselves and the team for building up to that level. We still have a very long way to go. So for a lot of our clients who own businesses, et cetera, we're in the same game. Like we're trying to build an institution that lasts and that has very high goals. And we're going through all the same trials and obstacles that our clients are going through. And that's one of the reasons we want to have these conversations. And I think eventually we're going to have business owners on here, et cetera, to share their vulnerabilities and their wins and their obstacles, et cetera. But I think we stumbled on a really good topic yesterday. And Colin, you started bringing this up to me earlier today, which was basically how do you build the business and capitalize on the fundamental tools that maybe are overlooked. So I was sitting with a client yesterday to put it in context. Guy has an outstanding business. It's a roofing business. He's been doing it for decades. And it's a little undercapitalized because he's been told essentially by the accountant, hey, why would you leave any capital in there? There's no reason to. First of all, I disagree with that, but we can revisit that point another time. But I had to give him kind of a motivating talk saying, hey, you can keep on operating in the mom and pop sphere, or we can push you from a small business to a small, medium-sized business, which I really love the multiples of returns when you start to creep up beyond small and like more into mid, depending on how you define that. But essentially what we got down to was, hey, I know this might sound crazy, but my hypothesis is that even though you've been doing this business for decades, I'm guessing that you kind of took your foot off the gas a little bit, and just with getting back to the basics and the blocking and tackling, I wouldn't be surprised if you can double the size of your existing business in the next 5 years. And we had a long conversation about it. He's like, well, kind of prove it. What's your evidence? And so we went through some basic stuff, and here's what we found. That when he would make phone calls, right? Just the basics, like, hey, you have these clients who are very happy with you. Are you reaching out to them? Do you have a prospect list that you're calling specifically? So I guess the topic of today is, as business owners, are you using the phone because it's so unbelievably powerful? I'm almost convinced that the phone is one of, if not the top tool that you can use for building your business. Colin, I'll throw the ball over to you. What are your thoughts?
Dude, without question. So I want to touch on something real quick as we unfold that. You talked about the vulnerability of this chat, right? I think we oftentimes forget that that's what we're doing when we're confined having these business conversations. You're essentially getting naked in front of another person, right? In order to grow your business. And believe me, it's not easy to always do that. But one area is like, I was essentially undressing, right? And saying like, hey, I can't believe that we shoved the phone off to the side, for a little glitch there. Because something that happened to us recently was, a client had a pretty basic question that they emailed in, and as opposed to emailing her back, I just thought, well, you know what? Haven't talked to her in a while. It would probably be best that I just give her a phone call. And I'm thinking, 2 or 3 minutes, maybe 5 minutes, and we're going to wrap up this conversation. Well, the conversation leads to, where her family's at, what they've been up to, the struggles that they currently have, some of the information and the advice that they've been giving in these general settings that frankly were way off for her personal situation, and ultimately resulted in us having to set up another time to get together to go deeper into what she was looking to accomplish. And frankly, and I'm not scared to admit this, it's going to result in business for us, right? And like these are the things that oftentimes it's really easy to ignore the phone call, follow up with an email or shoot a text message over or something like that. But you're right, getting back to the basics, executing the fundamentals of, I call it a weapon. The phone is one of the biggest weapons in business, and you have such an advantage if you're willing to get comfortable using that weapon over many of your peers, certainly, and definitely over some of your competitors.
If we think about how powerful it is, it's so simple to analyze and say, well, hey, I got back to the client, I sent them an email, I did my part. Well,
Yep.
That to me just signifies that you don't know human nature, right? The amount of times where I send an email, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, my brain tells me, yeah, I'm done, job done. That is just not true. I mean, when you're in a client-facing business, basically, if you interface with any other human on the opposite side of the transaction, which is basically all transactions, then you know that there's a million different priorities competing for the thing that you're trying to get to break through the noise. An email is very likely not going to do it. An email can be more of like a cover your bases, but that's table stakes, right? Just to make sure, like, an email is better than nothing. But a phone call is 100 times better, in my opinion, oftentimes, than sending an email. There's just more texture. Now, to be fair, I do believe that there's nothing better than one sitting knee to knee with somebody, face to face, breaking bread, going through all those dimensions of connections and so on. I'm not confused on that. But the reality is the commute that it takes to get you there, the extra time, right? All of those things, it starts to equalize the value equation. Whereas, like, okay, there's going to be a certain amount of volume of phone calls that I could make that would start to exceed the value of one meeting with a client, let's say. So honestly, I could probably get done, I don't know, Colin, what do you think? Probably 15 to 20 phone calls, maybe even more, in the same time that I go to one lunch with one client. So at some point, there's that equilibrium break. And then also, there's something inherent about phone calls relative to like sitting face to face with somebody, that there's an efficiency component that's naturally implied in the platform itself. If you and I go out to lunch, it'd be really weird for us to spend 12 minutes together. Minimum, we're probably sitting there for 45 minutes. Versus the phone call, it's not weird to have a 12-minute phone call. What's your perspective?
Yeah, well, I think to that exact point, especially for the folks that would be listening to this podcast, right? The entrepreneurs, people that are running businesses or aspire to run a business and want holistic wealth, right? They tend to prefer shorter conversations, right? Because they prioritize action. So as nice as it is to take a client out to dinner, right, or to have that face-to-face meeting, a lot of the people that would be interested in this conversation prioritize action over the intimacy of sitting next to you, right? So I think getting down to, hey, what do we need to accomplish and how can we tackle this in the most efficient manner? The phone is such a great tool for that. And the situation that I was just discussing, my client's actually in Oklahoma. I'm in Ohio. So what I can't develop in that face-to-face sitting next to you type meeting, I better make sure that I prioritize things like the phone call and not the email exchange back and forth, because that intimacy touch is absolutely lost because of geographical boundaries, right? Or barriers there. So I know the result of it though, right? She was extremely happy. The touch meant way more than the email. And now we get to discuss, hey, what are the options? What's the path forward to helping your family out, to insulating yourself from the risk that she was specifically looking to hedge?
How do you protect against the phone call turning into a 3-hour conversation? Is there any tools or techniques you use?
Yeah, that's a really good question, right? Because oftentimes people are opting for the email or the text message because that has a built-in buffer to, hey, you're not going to send me, you're not going to send me a novel over a text message and get that type of response back. So, like we always say, there's risk to everything, right? So just planting the seed, right? You could say like, hey, I wanted to give you a call, have 10 minutes right before I head into the next meeting. But the topic that you brought up was better handled over the phone, right? So you can do things to preface how much time that you have, how much availability that you're going to let somebody in on, to ensure that they're not going to take advantage of what should be a good touch to that particular client.
Do you do anything to frame the conversation prior? Like, one of the things I love that you said, and I use the same technique, which is, hey, I'm running into a meeting here in 15 minutes, but I didn't want to let your call go or your email go unanswered. So I've got a quick 15 minutes. Let's chat about what you're going to chat about. Do you use any other framing techniques to guide the conversation, almost like the prerequisite guide, so that it doesn't just, expand off into like, oh, we could visit any given topic under the sun?
Yeah, absolutely. I think making sure you start to understand, hey, what's the purpose or what is the origin of the question, right? So what has inspired you to send that email over, to call in with the specific question. So I'll lay out what happened, with my client. She went to like a general Medicare informational type seminar, and the result was it really had her 180 on long-term care insurance, right? So, Medicare is a big hook for people in our industry, right? They try to use some general topic that everybody's kind of afraid of or definitely looking for additional information on. And then they'll backdoor it with, oh, hey, by the way, then there's this, right? And that long-term care piece got my client thinking, where before she was ready to self-insure, right? They have the assets, they're in good enough shape to do that if they choose, but they also have the ability to hedge that risk for pennies on the dollar. And an aha moment or a light bulb moment must have happened while she was considering this, seeing as her husband is relatively close to 65. So that's why it's becoming more of a burning issue for them. And I just made sure that we stayed focused on, hey, what's the goal? Are you buying insurance just because you heard somebody talk, right? Or are you looking to hedge against the risk of long-term care robbing assets from not only it's not just a typical situation, right? They have children, but one is special needs, right? So they don't have the luxury of robbing that particular child from assets, and it really struck a chord with her, right? So making sure to correctly compartmentalize what you're looking for, so it doesn't trickle over to, and oh, well, now we need to talk about Medicaid and how are we going to pay for long-term care if we want to do it in home versus, we set a session to where we can go deeper into that, where we're not violating 30, 45, 60 minutes on the phone. There's a time and place to go deep, but the phone call, right, you got to do your best to keep it short, or else the effective tool turns into a relative problem for you.
Yeah, I think so. Some of the things that come up for me when you're talking about this is, when you're trying to execute business, keeping it within the appropriate lane, because conversations, especially on the phone, can start to really get out of that. Like, they start to expand out of the perimeters that, like, it's just going to send you down a road where you can't execute the transaction to serve the client that you're trying to get to. If all of a sudden you're talking about, the kid's birthday party and then the Eagles football game or whatever that is, some of that is good. But the reality is, as a professional, you are there to serve a purpose, to get them to an end destination, whether or not they know that they need that yet or not, right? As a professional, that is what we are here to do. And in anybody listening to this, that's what, very likely in your business, that is what you are there to do. I have found that using framing techniques is really important. So I will just say it, like, most of the clients that I work with, which I love, is mostly business owners. So I will frame the conversations oftentimes of saying, hey man, I know you're busy, I'm busy, right? Like, I'm here to serve you. Tell me to shut up if you're not interested in any of this stuff. But I just learned about this thing. I wanted to share it with you. Is it a good fit for you? You don't have to give me an answer right now. I would love it so that we can actually get moving for you. But I wanted to plant the seed in your mind. What are your thoughts? And all of a sudden, that framing technique, dude, it cuts off easily 15 minutes of small talk, which I cannot freaking stand small talk. It doesn't move the needle for you or for me, and we're both trying to feed our families. So as long as we have that trust between us, then let's just get down to business. And as long as you have that rapport, that can work. But those framing techniques are unbelievably important.
I think the consistency too, and ethically here, right? But like training the client that, yeah, we're not just going to talk about the weather and what happens to the football game every time that we get together, right? I understand it. People are trying to be polite, but honestly, they could probably do without it as well, right? So remaining consistent and making sure you're getting down to business to do exactly what you said, Wes, to serve the client, because that's why they hired you, right? They did not hire you to chat about if the snowstorm this weekend is going to shut down the stores. Like like they don't really need your input there as much as you probably think they might, right? So the consistency of saying, hey, I know your time is valuable, right? Because working with business owners, they value their time more than dollars. I can almost guarantee it. And they at least have an equation to what their time is worth. They don't want to spend half an hour on the phone with you when only 5 minutes was focused on productivity. Right. So the consistency of it and making sure that you're training the clients to understand what this relationship is. I think, we've talked about this in the past. I don't really want to be the financial advisor or the wealth coach that is showing up to your kid's birthday party, right? Or is going to high school graduations. That's not really the relationship or the grounds of the relationship that we're looking to establish, right? I'm here to be your coach. You hired me to be your CFO. You want to be the CEO, and you want me to report the financials and help you get back to completing your mission, right? So I think being consistent with that is a huge component.
Completely agree. And one of the benefits of working with business owners is we all know that we have a certain amount of time to be on the field where we have to score points. And then we want to get back to our families.
Yep.
So it's actually a courtesy when you say, hey, I'm here to serve you. Let's make this really efficient. And I want to be the guy, and we want to be the team to get that done for you. I think what has happened is the marketing industry, in my opinion, if you go deeper into the bowels of like some of these marketing, curriculums, it's operates off of the formula of, hey, in order for somebody to do business with you, they're going to have to know you, like you, and trust you. I think that needs to evolve to, no, they need to know you, like you, trust you, and feel and be confident that you are competent. But then I would actually invert that. I would say, no, I need you to know that I am competent first. And through that competency and the repeated execution of that competency, you will begin to know me, like me, and trust me. And if I even had to evolve it from there, I would say, I want you to know that I'm competent, and I want you to see that you can trust me through that competent display, right? Then maybe you can get to know me a little more if it's to your benefit. If you don't want to know about my personal life, that's okay. I can still serve you without you knowing me in that way. But if it's important for you, let's do it. And then if you want to like me, great. But honestly, and I say this, I don't need you to like me to do business with me. I don't need to like my surgeon. It would be a benefit, definitely. But if I had to look at the scale, I want to know that he's competent first, and that I can trust him. And after that, the pie, those slices of the pie get smaller and smaller. I don't need to know about him. I don't necessarily need to like him. Now, it would be great, obviously, if he was a level 10 on all of those, but I want to make sure I invert that. Number one, add that final component of competency, but put that to number one on the list.
I think depending on the industry too, like, we're talking about your financial future. You brought up a surgeon. So you're talking about probably a pretty invasive operation if that's where you find yourself. I can't imagine likability is the number one thing that people are seeking in those, like competency. They want to know that this is
Comes
not
in
their
telling you a
first.
knock knock joke, before you
Yeah,
close your X-ray. Yeah.
right. So, if it's the bartender, right, and something like that, yeah, you might prefer to go visit the bar on the night that the bartender there is somebody that you get along with. So sure, in certain areas maybe it is, more bent or more skewed towards that. I can't imagine when we're talking about wealth creation, when we're talking about helping grow your business, when we're talking about your health, right? Things of significant importance, right? Towards the top of the food chain, that competency wouldn't come first. And yeah, through competency, I think you earn trust. And I tell people this all the time when we're meeting with them. I don't expect you to trust me right away. That's crazy. I believe that I will earn it through my actions, through the way that we serve you. And you will eventually be able to trust my recommendations, my input, my advice, because you have a stack of evidence that we were competent in the past.
Yep, completely agree with you. Yeah, I mean, so I am getting back to the original conversation that I was letting you in on with, which was with this roofer. If we evolve it and we say, okay, we are on the same page of knowing that the phone is a really powerful tool to move business forward. Well, then it's like, okay, well, how do we start to stack that to add more value? Well, in my opinion, I don't really think most businesses do not need a super complex CRM. And just for everybody listening, you can spend all of your profits every single day of the week on the new fanciest technology. But if you stick Colin and I into a fighter jet cockpit, yeah, there's a whole bunch of fancy buttons on there, but I have no idea what any of those buttons do. So as it relates to this conversation, a simple spreadsheet that we use in our office is unbelievably profound, which is literally, if you think about it like this, we call it the last touch report. So it is as simple as it's almost as simple as it sounds. You have your list of clients and prospects, and then in one of the columns you have when's the last time we talked to them, right? And then now a little bit of coding is involved here, but it's pretty basic coding in Excel or Google Sheets. The next column over is, well, how many days have elapsed since the last time we touched them to today? And for different levels of clients, right? If those, maybe some of the bandwidth is like, okay, we're in the green zone, which would be good if it's less than 15 days. If it's 16 days to 45 days, it's yellow. If it's 46 days and beyond, it's red. So heat mapping, number one, keeping a list of your clients and prospects and who you've talked to and when you've talked to them, right? And then what is the distance? What are those tolerance levels that you are okay with? And an even better way of phrasing this is think about what your competitors, think about your most superior competitor. What would their tolerance levels be? How many days do you think that superior competitor is letting go before they touch their biggest clients or their biggest prospects? And then that heat map, man, I mean, that is freaking gold inside of a business.
Spot on. And I can't imagine that most of the people listening to this that run businesses have more than 5 or maybe 10 metrics inside their business that should be delineated to that detail. If you're in a client-facing business, if you're serving people in any capacity, the last time that you touch them has to be one of those simple basic metrics, right? So running our business off of that basic spreadsheet has opened our eyes to how much we weren't serving our clients in that capacity, and having it heat mapped and in your face, knowing that, oh, you know what? I haven't talked to Bill and Susie Smith in 172 days. That is unacceptable, right? But you can fool yourself. It's like, no, I sent out a newsletter, or I sent them a Christmas gift, or, yeah, we had our annual review or something like that. If you're not tracking that stuff, right? And I think all of this is just subcategories of action, right? Whether it be tracking the data or picking up the phone, right? Prioritizing action so that you make sure you are doing what you set out to do, what you promised these people. I highly recommend. If you're not doing that, that's a low hanging fruit for very, very cost effective. It's super cheap to ensure that you're running the business the way that you intend to run it.
Yeah, I mean, Excel and Google, assuming
Yeah.
you have Windows operating system and a Google account, both of those are essentially free, or at least it's not adding any extra additional cost, and very, very powerful. I have even found that pretty sophisticated CRMs don't even have the report that I'm referring to. They have all these other bells and whistles, but if they do have the report, you have to click and drag and, you know, download and export so many different things and then manipulate it. That's like another 2 hours until you actually get the data that you want. Versus this report is where you input the data and it's self-reporting immediately. So the other thing I'd like to say is, if someone hears this, don't be surprised if your initial reaction is, oh yeah, we do that. Because that's oftentimes my initial reaction. It's no different than when, you know, I was in high school and in, I don't know, calculus class or whatever. Oftentimes when the teacher would write all the formulas on the board, I'd be like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And then when I get to the freaking test, it's like, whoa, don't know how to do that one. Right? There's a massive difference between saying, I understand the concept and I'm actually doing the thing. And the way that you know that you're doing the thing, I actually literally just had this mirror image conversation yesterday. I was sitting with another business owner and I asked them about their accounting, specifically their performance accounting and how up to date their accounting is. Now, the answer that I originally received, which was, oh, yeah, we do it every other month because that's the frequency that we need. I said, okay, great. Can you show me that right now? Even though, by the way, I think that's far too late. We want to try to adopt our accounting practices to weekly. So he's going on an every other month basis, but I still wanted to call the bluff. Okay, great. So if I literally asked you to email me a report, I would see that the maximum distance between today and your last accounting report was no more than 60 days ago. Are you saying that's what I would see? He's like, well, you know, he's like, so then I think ultimately what we defined was it's been like 5 or 6 months.
Yeah.
That's a big difference. So it's no different here. If you're thinking, oh, yeah, we do that, we track our phone calls. Okay, great. Export me the list and show me that you have a bunch of updated phone calls within today or at latest yesterday. And if that list is not updated, right, then you're not doing what we're saying. And by the way, we have to hold ourselves to the same exact standards. It's a daily / weekly challenge. Every single week we have to say, oh shoot, we have to update our case management. We have to update our it's called our case management sheet. That's where we track all these phone calls. We have to update that. It is, human nature still applies, right? Even though you have the structure, you still have to do the push-ups.
What's the saying? It's like you judge others by their actions, but yourself by your own intentions, right? So it's easy to see like, oh, well, they haven't done it, right? Because they're just showing you it. You don't know what their true intentions are, but you're giving yourself the benefit of the doubt all the time because no, well, I meant to do the accounting. No, I meant to update the case management sheet. No, I meant to reach out to this client, right? And then you're checking these boxes mentally because you're not tracking them physically, right? So definitely don't get fooled by what your intentions were because that, the client doesn't care, right? You might have had the best intentions in the world, but ultimately you dropped the ball somewhere along. And yet, and by the way, hold me accountable here. I think to begin the week, I asked the team to hold me accountable if I updated the case management sheet, so this is not a lot of these conversations that we'll have we're talking to ourselves, right? And we just find that when we say these things out loud to each other, it's very, very valuable and actually pushes the business forward as a result.
Yeah. And to really provide some extra texture here, we believe in this so much that we're in the process of hiring somebody right now to basically do this full time. And it's not even a sales position. It's just to get on the phone, number one, to answer the phones and to get somebody on the phone to make outbound phone calls of just touching people saying, hey, had some updates for you. Just want to make sure, okay, has anything changed? And to put perspective, as of the recording of this, we're negotiating this currently, but I think we're going to pay this person around $21 to $22 an hour. So, but we're going to aim for full time. So for anybody out there who's listening to this, it doesn't mean that you have to make all of the phone calls. In fact, I think phone calls are so powerful that as long as you get a good, competent person to make some of those, and honestly, could make 50, 60, 70% of those phone calls. I do think a certain percentage of those, a critical mass percentage, should be from the thought leader or from the coach or from however you're positioned in your business. That has to come from the leader. But probably 70 to 80%, there's a good argument, don't have to come from the leader. And the client on the other side still gets the warm and fuzzies of being updated by the team.
I don't think the standard, like, I don't think a lot of clients expect the owner, the thought leader, the advisor, the coach, to make 100% of the phone calls, right? So, that's head trash. You gotta get past that. Make a sufficient amount. Make sure that they know that you haven't forgotten about them. But anything else should be outsourced for good reason, right? Again, I talked earlier, or at least hinted at it, that a lot of you have probably already done the equation of what your time is worth. And if your time is worth more than $21, $22 an hour, a lot of that then should be offloaded, right? That's just simple arithmetic. So absolutely cannot stress enough how powerful of a tool the phone is. But in a world with ever-changing technology, with all of the easy or frictionless ways that you could communicate with people, it often gets put to the back burner. And if you own a business, if you're trying to scale your company, you're leaving so much on the field by not picking up the phone or having somebody pick up the phone and push the business forward.
And a lot of this comes down to the similar fundamentals of just other successful patterns. It's going to come down to volume, right? So before you judge it and say, oh, well, I've done that before, it's like, okay, wait a second. How many times have you done it, right? Are you doing it the right way? Are you doing it for the right frequency? Have you done it for the right duration, right? So if somebody says, well, I've tried making phone calls. Okay, great. How many? Oh, you've made 10, right? Okay, what was the quality of those? And what way were you making those phone calls? Oh, so you made 10 generalized phone calls where the conversation was so casual that the end client barely knew what you were talking about. You had no business interest in the phone call. Well, that's a mistake. Okay, we got to fix that, right? And then what's the frequency you're making those phone calls? And then, okay, well, how many days straight have you done it? So, oh yeah, the phone doesn't work. Oh, oops, I've only made 10 phone calls over the last 3 weeks and the conversations were not guided. Well, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about deliberate, intentional practice using the telephone, which we think is one of the most powerful business tools at your disposal. Colin, thank you very much, brother. Anything else? Final words of wisdom?
Nope. The only reason that I could talk about this confidently is that's what I came from, right? I was in a sales pit for 3 years, hammering the phone every single day. So just to reinforce what you just said, Wes, 100 phone calls, you were in the ballpark of catching 10 people if you're doing it cold, right? So 10% of the phone calls that you make, you're actually going to get the person to pick up. You're not just going to make a phone call and have business just fall in your lap, right? It's like every other walk of life. You gotta stay with it. The only way to get better at anything is by actually doing it, right? So be a practitioner, pick up the phone and make the phone calls.
And for anybody listening to this, I would love to hear, if you listen to this particular podcast, go out and make 100 phone calls to existing clients, to prospects, etc., and make whatever multiples of those 100 that you want to make. So make 3, 4, 5, 600, and then shoot us an email or get back to us and let us know, because we are convinced that this is one of the most profound tactics in business, and it's the fundamentals. So we'd love to hear the results. Anyway, Colin, thank you very much, brother. I'll see you on the next show.
Heck yeah. Thanks, brother.